Hi, I'm John Strohmeyer with Strohmeyer Law. On today's episode of No Unfinished Business, we're talking with Evan Levine and Nainesh Shah of Complete Advisors. We're going to be talking about what it means to get quiet acceptance of your appraisals. Now, Evan, I'm going to toss it to you first. We've been talking about this for a while, but before we really get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then a little bit more about Nainesh?
Yes, thank you, John, and it's great to be here. We're excited as a first timer. So our firm is Complete Advisors Valuations. We're based in Long Island, New York. We value businesses and operating entities globally, predominantly for gift and estate tax planning, but we also value entities for family law and business exit planning and other general business or tax or legal purposes. We value operating entities, complex partnerships, financial instruments, intellectual property, and more. We do not value real estate or artwork or collectibles, just entities. My role is head of engagements. I become the liaison between the client or attorney and accountant and our valuation department. And our valuation department is headed up by my good friend and founding partner, Nainesh Shah. And Nainesh, before we started our firm, was a portfolio manager on Wall Street for over 25 years. He's a CFA and CVA, and he specializes in valuing entities or businesses that are unique and complex.
Excellent. And Nainesh, Evan gave you some wind up, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, John, and thank you. Uh, I started on Wall Street in 1992 and started analyzing public companies. So 5 years ago, when I joined with Evan, we came across this concept of valuing private companies. I didn't know that a field existed, but because of my background of understanding public company and complex instruments, it became quite easy to analyze private businesses. And ever since, we've been getting, as Evan mentioned, complex and unusual entities to value.
Excellent. Yeah, and so let's get started. We had come up with the topic of quiet acceptance. The idea is if you're valuing, if you're appraising these entities, what we really want is for, ideally the IRS to look at it once, see, oh, they've done their job appraising this, quietly stamp it, approved and move on. There's nothing to see here. Where do we even start on something like this?
I think what you have to first core idea is the report should be such a high quality that whoever the IRS agent is looking at the report would say, yeah, this is a good quality report. The question then is what goes into that report? And we can go into detail, but broad concept is the story has to flow, meaning whatever the business is, whatever the numbers are, they jive together. The second concept is, are you supporting every single idea and every single number with some supporting data? And then, of course, there is a lot more to it because this is like 120-page report, but that's the core idea.
Right. And so if we start thinking about a story, well, I mean, if this is a business, what kind of story are we trying to tell? I mean, give me a few examples of that.
Story you are trying to tell is what the business is, what really at core they do, how does current economic situation, national, domestic, local economy, how does that impact that business in whatever way? And I can get you some example, give you some example. Then where does this business fit into an industry? And then you go into numbers. So let me just give you an example. If it is a startup, let's say it's a established business. It's a liquor store business in Long Island where we are. How does broad economy impacts it? Does COVID as a broad change, does COVID increases the business or decreases the business? You have to come up with the idea and a logic and then support that logic. If it is an industry, let's say coal industry, and does coal prices in China impact coal prices in US, or shipping rate from Australia to Europe does it impact coal prices in US? Those are the ideas that you have to play with, because you have to support that and then say, okay, the future is this. Because most of the time, operating entity, which is going concern, the future is what you are looking at.
Excellent. Can you think of any examples where maybe that story wasn't lined up, where it didn't make sense and may have, I mean, obviously not a report you would have worked on, but can you think of how that could be undermined?
Well, good question. Sometimes you have to you think about stories that support your idea for the valuation. And I just touched on startups. So technology startups have stories. They talk about millions of customer, X subscription rate. They're going to get X percentage of market share, and this is the value. That is what they are trying to sell to venture capitalists. So how can a three-person technology company in garage can be valued at $100 million? That's why. If let's just take a current example. ChatGPT, OpenAI, they want the value of $1 trillion or so, or what some ridiculous number. How do they come up with that type of idea? They have to support that with the story. And if they say, billion people going to use it, they're going to pay $50 a month, and they will pay forever, then you can come up with that valuation. But that's, again, you're trying to make up the story.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, what I think about when I think of stories, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I had an estate tax return with a business, specifically it was a warehouse owned by the estate. Well, we had appraisers out and all of them refused to walk in the building. It was such a hazard physically for their safety that they all refused to walk in. And ultimately, I knew that the IRS was going to have to look at this. We knew we were already paying estate tax, but thinking, all right, well, what we're going to do, we have to explain to the IRS why we can't attach an appraisal. The reason we can't attach an appraisal is nobody will go in. So I ended up getting sworn statements from the appraisers saying, here, we refuse to go in, which left us with, well, we have to tell them something. And what we then did was, we started with what we kind of reasonably put our finger in the air of, thought was contents of the building, but then the remediation costs and everything else. And ultimately ended up with about a 90% discount because, if the building was worth $1 million, we thought it was going to end up taking about 850 to 900,000 to get the stuff out and get it sold. So even if we did sell it for 600, we had, 500 worth or whatever the numbers worked out to get the stuff out of the building. And the IRS never fought back on that. I think they looked at it kind of going along with our quiet acceptance. They looked at what we had told them and said, no, there's no reason, even though this is a taxable estate, we were cutting a check to the IRS.
Yeah. And see, what you did right was you supported your idea that you can't go in the building by getting a sworn statement from appraiser. Now, that would be something that IRS would pay attention to. Say somebody says that they can't go in. They wouldn't say that without any good reason. So, and that's what I meant by supporting your idea and data and the story.
Exactly. Yeah. Make it easy for them to look at it once and then move on.
Yeah, exactly. And that also kind of falls into one, as you know, John, valuation is not a perfect science. There is a wide range to it. There is an art to some of this data. There's a science, of course. There's a science in form of financial computation. But if you support your data, then it becomes easier, and you can come up with if there's a wide valuation range, then you can choose the higher number or lower based on your judgment and support that number.
Right. Are there any common mistakes you see, common pitfalls on dealing with this?
We see this all the time, right? When we get a call from client or attorney, sometimes the first question they ask is, what is the discount you're going to take on this? You
Right.
say that. Um, it's the right question in their mind, but it's not a right question from our perspective because I have no idea, or we have no idea what we are getting into, or what type of business it is, or what's the comparable companies. What the data tells us. So we refrain from talking about discount. But if you are taking 40-50% discount on something, that will IRS will notice it. They'll question it, and
Right.
then you go down, and then it becomes less noticeable from there on. Right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And so as it goes with discounts like that, are there any trends of what? Uh, One, I know that there are multiple types of discounts, and so I don't want to lump it all into, well, let's take 50% of the value as a discount, but I guess you're typically going to be stacking multiple types of discounts to get the larger one. Are there any trends you're seeing in what works more or what is more challenging to get beyond just a let's get to 40%?
uh, so there are two main category rather: discount for lack of marketability and discount for lack of control. So if it is a minority owner who doesn't have a control on the business, you can take that discount. Rather than stacking, it's multiplicative. So if I'm taking 40% or 30% discount for lack of control, and if I'm taking another 30% discount, it's not 30 and 30 60, it's 30 1.3 times 1.3. So it's less than 60. Uh, there are other discounts. There are premiums that you have to, but there is another discount which we just worked on: key person discount. If a CEO or a founder is the driver, and if he can't be around, what will be the value of that business? But generally speaking, it's discount for lack of marketability and discount for lack of control is what we see.
Right. That's interesting because the marketability and control I hear a lot. We'll have clients who will recapitalize a corporation into voting and non-voting so
Right.
that they'll keep more of a premium with the control piece, but they can at least push out some of the value to family members.
Sure.
But the key person, that's interesting. I mean, I'm sure I've heard of that before, but it's been a while since it's been long enough that I don't normally use that as part of the examples when I'm talking to clients about that.
Yeah, this came up during a work about buy and sell agreement.
Hmm.
So the two parties were interested in creating a buy and sell agreement where the founder and the CEO is still working, but X number of years out is not working. What will happen to the business value of the business? So this has to, you kind of have to compute that. The other type of discounts that we have seen that's more not common again, but if the company's name and goodwill of the name, how does that play out if it is by agreement that's they're trying to sell the business? So a lot of different things, but it's a very interesting space, and you get so many different nuances in this type of work that um, it makes it really exciting. We
Good.
valued a business which had a contract or had a JV with a Chinese company, and there was a litigation where Chinese company wasn't giving proper documentation and the dividend, and we had to value the litigation itself or the case. Interesting stuff that happens in this space.
Well, yeah, and this might be the place to get Evan back in the conversation of, I mean, what are the, beyond just advisors looking for, oh, we'll have a gift tax return or an estate tax return. What are some of the situations where we might want more, might want to get an appraisal? Evan?
Oh, it's endless. Buy-sell agreement is common, where you put in a formula clause. Business divorce, family divorce, and my favorite one is just the fiscal checkup. For a business to do evaluation every 5 years, I think is a good practice, regardless of if they're buying, selling, or doing any tax or estate planning. It's not really the number. When we go through it, usually when we come up with the number, particularly for mid-size or smaller businesses, they come back and they tell me afterwards, I kind of thought it was worth that anyway. So the number itself is not the value. The value is the process, the questions. At least in our team, Nainesh and his team go so deep and they ask so many questions that they get to think about their strengths and their weaknesses and see how organized or disorganized they are with their finances and their files. And then you could think about something called value enhancement. What can I do in the next 5 years to enhance the value? So there are just so many reasons. Employee benefits, ESOPs require valuations, financial reporting, on and on.
Interesting. I mean, I like hearing that it's not just, the financial checkup is not only where are you now, but what could we have done or what should you be doing that might tweak that value up? My assumption is, and I'll let y'all tell me, there's not anything where it's, oh, well, if you just made more money, then the valuation was gone. Sure, that's easy, but what sorts of things have you seen that you're giving as their report card or their the new diet for the business?
Well, there's so many, but the one that I could think of, just one we worked on about 1.5 years ago, and the valuation initially had nothing to do with tax planning or estate planning. It was for exit planning. It was a company that was said, we're getting ready to sell in the next year or two, and we want to start by having it valued. And one thing that we realized through the valuation is that the business had way too much owner centricity. The owners were doing too much, everything. They couldn't leave for 2 or 3 weeks without the business falling apart. And we realized right away that's going to be problematic. Unless they go out and create a layer of middle management, they're going to have a tough time selling the business. And we, throughout the valuation process, we uncovered this problem, and we pointed out the importance and advised them to hire someone that could be client facing and that could replace you. And, that was one example, but a lot comes up throughout the valuation process because of how thorough it is. Sometimes they'll act on it, sometimes they won't, but it'll give them an opportunity to really look in the mirror and see where they are in terms of an exit and in terms of transferable value, which is often very different than book value.
This is, John, this is one of those cases where key person discount is 90%.
Right.
Where key person drives everything, and they need to make sure that doesn't happen.
And then we had another one we did recently. It was an insurance business, and we valued it, and for sale. They were coming close to a sale, and then the client came back about 6 months later and said, I want a second report for name and likeness, because the tax attorney came in with advice about stripping out the name and likeness and selling it separately as a way to reduce taxes. So we updated that report, and that was all tax driven, but it's not always tax driven. It could be, planning oriented, or tax driven, both.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that, look, I own a law firm. I'm the only owner here. I've thought about acquiring other firms and thought about, had offers to, why don't you come join us, or why don't you sell out to us? And just thinking about what those prices look like for a law firm, knowing that, in my mind, what I've heard and learned, the key person discount seems like it's about 85% in most small law firms, because it is driven so much by the person at the top of the heap.
Yeah. Service businesses, accountants, small law firms, valuation firms, we have the biggest problems with transferable value because of how owner dependent it comes, and we feel that everyone wants and needs us,
Right.
And it's a problem, and it needs to be addressed. You don't want to be the shoemaker's, son without shoes.
Right. So to start landing the plane on this, is there something that businesses, advisors should be thinking about? Like, here's the first thing that if Evan and Nainesh get involved, you better have this ready to go first, and any sort of like house cleanup things that will give the most bang for the buck in terms of raising value.
In terms of raising value.
Right.
Nainesh?
One thing I would say is be really good at keeping your data in order. documents in order. I would ask, if I'm going to value business, I'm going to ask that first. And if somebody's going to come and buy a business, they're going to ask that first. So that would be the first thing. The other is, I think what Evan touched on.
Yeah.
If you go on a vacation for a month and not call your business, what would happen? And if you can answer that succinctly,
Yeah.
then you're
And
in
the faster and further it would fall, the less transferable value you have.
Exactly.
So
That's from
management
the
is
planning perspective. Yeah.
middle management is the bigger thing. And then at the end of the day, Nainesh reminds me, you got to make money. I mean, it's still mostly going to come down to,
Absolutely.
historical earnings. Are you making money? Are you profitable? That's that's going to be the big thing. Unless you have users like the technology companies have, or valuable assets and trucks and machines and things like that. You need to be profitable. But also, I know we veered a little bit from the initial context, which was more about tax and estate planning and quiet acceptance. And I just wanted to go back to that for a minute, because I'm in a kind of a different role, being the liaison between the attorney, the CPA, or the direct client, and Nainesh and his team, the valuation department. And in the context of quiet acceptance, Nainesh said high quality. And I just want to reinforce that Nainesh and his team, or any valuation firm for that matter, the quality is commensurate with how much data and information they receive. And that's the biggest challenge. So I'm constantly speaking to people and negotiating valuations and prices. And Nainesh tells me all the time, it could be the greatest client in the world, but if I can't get information, I can't value it. So am I going to have access to management? Are they going to share reports with me? If they don't give information, it's not going to go anywhere. So it's the quality and the quantity of the information that leads to the quality and quantity of the report. The other thing that's very interesting is we're working with an estate attorney locally here in New York who advises a lot of the owners of Major League Baseball teams and NBA teams and football teams on valuation matters. And he said something on our call recently that was just music to our ears. He said that he tells his clients, these owners, all the time, valuation work can either be good or fast.
Right.
It takes time, right? A complex entity, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, maybe even 6 months, depending on how the data comes in. So, the advisors and the tax advisors and financial planners should remind their clients, if they want to come in and have a professional value done in 2 weeks, forget about it. It's just not going to happen. So if the information is available and transparent and shared, and they understand the time. Now, sometimes we could get a number quicker. Nainesh and his team will do a summary work paper with the number. That sometimes can be done quicker. But then the full report could take a long time. So time and quality of information, I think, is very important in the context of quiet acceptance.
Excellent. Well, no, I think this is probably a good place to leave us for now. Evan and Nainesh, if folks are looking to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
You could check out Google, CompleteAdvisors.com, or feel free to call me directly if you'd like. Our main number is 516-240-6161. Or either of us could be reached by emails, and you can find our emails on the website.
Excellent. Evan, Nainesh, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you,
You're
John.
welcome.
Really appreciate your time.
Bye now.